If you're working as a health, fitness, or a wellness professional, it's really likely that you're going to run into clients that are dealing with poor bile flow or gallbladder sludge issues. And if you've read any of my books or if you've taken any of our courses for health professionals, you know that bile flow is really important for our clients so that they can digest their food correctly, so they can access minerals and fat-soluble vitamins in their food, and so the body can detox the way that it's supposed to detox. So if you haven't seen it already, we'll put a link in the description below for our video on 5 steps to help clients improve bile flow, and that includes some steps that you can take with your clients to help thin out that bile so it'll flow better. But in this video, we want to talk about 10 causes that can thicken up that bile or create gallbladder sludge. Because sometimes a client might be taking some steps to help thin out that bile, but if they're doing some of the wrong things or their body's dealing with issues that are really magnifying the problem, they're not going to see a whole lot of progress because they're working against their body more than they're helping it out. So we're going to jump into these causes of poor bile flow or ability to thicken up that bile so you can help your clients avoid these issues. Let's jump in.
TC Hale is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
So even if your client is not having bile flow issues, it's important to understand these things that can thicken up that bile so you can help clients avoid these issues if there's a risk of that coming about. And when we're talking about bile sludge and gallbladder sludge, we need to understand that bile is this soapy substance that's made by the liver and then it's stored in the gallbladder. And the gallbladder's job is to store and concentrate that bile. So a small amount of bile can be more effective. But if the bile is not flowing correctly, maybe not enough is moving out of the gallbladder, then more of that bile will stay in the gallbladder and then the gallbladder will continue to concentrate that bile. It doesn't have an off switch for its concentration trick that it does, so it continues to concentrate that bile until it concentrates it into sludge or even stones. So it's important that that gallbladder is being called upon so that that bile is constantly flowing and not staying in the gallbladder too long and getting too concentrated. So the first cause of gallbladder sludge or thickened bile can be high estrogen levels. Maybe a client is using birth control that can really raise estrogen levels. It appears that estrogen has the ability, when it goes high, to really thicken up that bile so it doesn't flow as well. It's very common to see clients that are using birth control. It's even really common now to see clients that are using estrogen therapy. Estrogen is very popular. All the cool kids are using estrogen therapy because estrogen, when it goes high, has the ability to help the body work a little bit better and remove some symptoms. Estrogen is a stress hormone that when the body can't really get things going the way that it wants to go, it'll raise these stress hormones to help the body function correctly. So if somebody crams a whole bunch of estrogen in the body, it can really help relieve a lot of symptoms. So for that reason, it's very popular now. The problem is when they're using this estrogen therapy, it has the ability to thicken up that bile and then create a lot of those symptoms for a totally different reason, because the bile's not flowing correctly and the client can't digest and the client can't detox the way they're supposed to. And even if they're not on some type of estrogen therapy or something, estrogen can still go high, maybe if they just have a lot of stress in their life or stress in their body. Either type of stress like this can raise estrogen and other stress hormones. So maybe a client is dealing with some type of infection, or maybe the body is dealing with a lot of stress. So maybe there's not stress in their life, but there's stress in their body. Or maybe resources are just going too low and the body can't make all the functions happen that it wants to function. So you can just look at a client's blood pressure, like at least 2 hours after a meal, but not fasted first thing in the morning. It should be after a meal. And if their systolic blood pressure number, that top number, is below 112, that's a strong sign that they don't have enough minerals and resources in the system to allow the body to function the way that it wants to function. So the body might be stressing out a little bit and raising these stress hormones. A client could also be fasting when they really shouldn't be fasting. Intermittent fasting and prolonged fasting is very popular now, and I'm not saying that's always bad. I use intermittent fasting sometimes. I use it with some of my clients in specific situations. But a lot of people are fasting when their body is really not set up to do that. So if you want to understand that a little bit better, you can check out our video on which clients should not use intermittent fasting. And when someone's using prolonged fasting, remember it's when we eat that we acidify that food, and when that acidic product leaves the stomach and goes into the duodenum, that's what triggers the gallbladder to squirt that bile down. So we need to eat to trigger that bile to flow. If we're not eating, the bile is going to stay in the gallbladder and continue to concentrate until it can create problems. So I like to use fasting for a lot of people. I just don't like to show off and do these really long 2, 3, 4 day fasts and such like a lot of people do because of all the problems it can create. There's a lot of benefit that can come from that, but when you understand what it can do to bile flow and the problems that can come from poor bile flow, I don't like to see people doing these really long fasts if their body's not really set up to thrive through that. And yeah, there's supplements that we use to thin out the bile, so a person might think, oh, I'll just use these supplements during my fast and that'll keep my bile thin and moving. But most of these supplements are food-based items that are going to break the fast and not make the fast work the way that it's supposed to work. So it kind of becomes a little counterproductive. Number 2 is someone eating a lot of estrogenic foods. If you consume a lot of these estrogenic foods like soy-based food and all these Frankenburger things that are filled with all this soy, it has the ability to trigger the body to say, oh, well, estrogen is really high because these estrogenic foods are coming in. So that can have a similar effect as estrogen really going high. So I like to see people avoid a lot of these soy and estrogenic type foods. Cause number 3 can be consuming too many grains or processed foods. For some people, this seems to have the ability to thicken up that bile. And for a lot of clients that we see, this is pretty much their whole diet. They're eating all this processed junk and they're in a hurry and they don't have time. But when we can help them start gravitating more towards real food, it can help avoid this issue of all this processed junk and grains thickening up the bile. Cause number 4 can be low stomach acid. Remember, it's that acid leaving the stomach and going to the duodenum that triggers the gallbladder to flow. But a lot of your clients are going to have issues where they're not producing enough stomach acid. A lot of clients are going to be taking like a PPI or an antacid or something that's totally turning off that stomach acid. So then that's not really going to trigger that bile to flow the way that it's supposed to. A lot of people won't be able to make enough stomach acid for a variety of reasons. Maybe their body doesn't have enough resources and minerals to produce that hydrochloric acid. Maybe somebody has some type of stomach or intestinal overgrowth of bacteria. A lot of these bacteria have alkaline waste that can alkalize the stomach acid that that person is making. So a client may be making the stomach acid, but they have some type of overgrowth that's neutralizing it and removing their ability to acidify the food correctly, so it's still not really going to trigger the gallbladder the way that it's supposed to. And if you need to understand that digestive process a little bit better, chapters 3 and 4 of my book, Health Pro Results, kind of walk you through helping clients figure out which aspects of digestion are not working correctly and steps you can help them take to improve that situation. And the book is available on Amazon, but I'll put a link in the description below so you can get the whole thing totally for free. And if you're a consumer that just happens to be watching this video, we'll put a link for my book, Kick Your Fat in the Nuts. We'll put that in the description below and you can get that for free as well. And chapters 3 and 4 of that book kind of go over that same process. It's just more written for consumers, where the Health Pro Results book is really for health professionals. Number 5 is a low-fat diet. A lot of clients are still eating like we were told to eat in the 80s when we were wearing parachute pants, and they don't understand that dietary fats can be very beneficial. So they're still running in horror from fat, and they're eating a low-fat diet. And remember that bile is what helps us emulsify or break down our dietary fats. So when we eat enough dietary fats, that can be another thing that tells the gallbladder, hey, squirt some of that bile down here to help us emulsify these dietary fats. So if they're not eating enough fats, that will call on less bile and less movement through the gallbladder. Cause number 6 can be a vegan or a vegetarian diet. Now, these diets don't always have to cause problems, but the way that most people do them, a lot of times a vegan diet can be kind of a low-fat diet, and a lot of times they're using a lot of these estrogenic soy-based frankenfoods for their protein sources. So if you're doing a vegan or vegetarian diet the wrong way, it can really be problematic. People can do them the right way and they'll be okay, but these can be problematic if people are doing low-fat or too many soy-based foods. Number 7 is what we call a catabolic imbalance. And it was Dr. Emmanuel Rivisi who helped us understand that the body has this natural circadian rhythm at the cellular level. So during the day, our body should be in this catabolic state where it's very good at keeping us going all day and creating energy and also breaking tissues down so that they can be rebuilt and renewed. And then at night, we should move into an anabolic state, which is where our body's very good at resting and sleeping and rebuilding and repairing. So you can see both of those states are very beneficial. The problem is some people can get stuck in one of those states most of the time, and then that can create a lot of health issues. So it appears that being in this catabolic state has the ability to thicken up the bile because of the way that it can adjust where the body is sending most of our water. So if a client is dealing with a catabolic imbalance, you want to help them improve that so it doesn't thicken up their bile. If you want to learn more about that, we'll put a link in the description below for our video on helping clients fix their circadian rhythm. Number 8 is high insulin, or if a client is taking a statin. Now, we're not telling you to tell clients to stop taking any medication. That may not be your place if you're not a medical doctor, but we need to understand that statins reduce cholesterol production. That's how they lower that cholesterol number. So the client's like, yay, my cholesterol number went down. But when the statin is restricting that cholesterol production, cholesterol is needed to produce bile. So that can restrict the body's ability to produce that bile, and then it's not going to flow as well, and it can thicken up in the gallbladder. We also see a lot of clients with high insulin issues because they're becoming insulin resistant from eating too many carbohydrates and processed junk and sugars and all this junk we should not be pounding our bodies with on a consistent basis. So when insulin goes too high, it can create inflammation, and it has the ability to thicken up that bile. Number 9 is that maybe a person is not drinking enough water. A lot of people just don't really drink water. They might not even like water, but the body needs a lot of water to really function correctly. And when you're not bringing enough water, a lot of our stuff gets thicker, like our bile. But that doesn't mean that you want clients drinking gallons of water. Just, hey, drink all the gallons of water. If someone's blood pressure is already low, like we talked about before, that systolic is below 112, and their minerals might already be low, well, drinking too much water is just going to wash away the small amount of minerals they have and really magnify a lot of symptoms or issues that they're already having. So we want to know where a client is before we tell them to just increase their water. And number 10, this is a little more rare, but it's possible that a client might not be producing enough bile. So maybe a liver isn't really working correctly. Maybe it's overwhelmed with a lot of other things going on and it can't do all of its jobs. And one of its jobs is to produce that bile. So if a client is not producing enough bile, then it won't flow as well and it can become more thick and sticky. So in that case, we can have them supplement with ox bile or TUDCA, and that can sort of stimulate the body to produce more bile. It also supplies the body with some bile to use in between meals like it should. But it doesn't really thin out the bile like some people believe. But if a client isn't making enough, it can stimulate them to produce some more. So you can see there's a lot of things that have the ability to thicken up that bile for your clients, and it can really vary from client to client. But if you're taking steps to thin out the bile and they're having a hard time getting it moving, you might want to look at these things to see if something might be working against them. But right now, if you haven't seen it and you want to learn more steps you can help clients take to thin it out and get it flowing better, jump over and check out our video on 5 steps to help clients improve bile flow. I can't wait to hear about your results.